in the past few months, I've had a lot of discussions with people who ranged greatly between those who said things have always been bad, and there's nothing new about it. We just hear about it more, and those who are actually shaken by how bad not only humanitarian crises and not only the system that is meant to address them has become, but also the public perception and the polarization even about who should and how should they survive. What is interesting is, in my anecdotal and unscientific estimation, more of the people who are troubled, if not terrified, are those who are veterans of the system, who have seen it all. People who have worked in Rwanda, people who have worked in DRC, in Iraq, in others. And at the same time, there is a couple of worlds that we are moving between like a pendulum. As the urgency of people's lives and precarity increases, we're seeing almost a cut in the middle fissure in the system. And I say that with very recent experience, because I came here from spending some time on the Gaza flotilla that is going to break the siege. And for the formal humanitarians, many will say those aren't humanitarians, those are political activists, and they're just using humanitarianism as a cover. It's an interesting view, because that was said about many of us and our organizations in the early days. I bet you, I worked for a long time with MSF, I bet you the ICRC said that when MSF started. But at the same time, there's a stark difference between the same topic and the same facts we possess when you hear the discussion about it on that flotilla and in the halls of the General Assembly. There are two worlds, two epistemic worlds and two practical ones. And there is a real difficulty in being a humanitarian, because you have to be ambivalent, if not schizophrenic, to inhabit both worlds and still be able to address the needs of people rather than the needs of the system. We are here to talk not about the system, but about the local humanitarianism that is often underrepresented, if at all represented, in the halls of power, where things get decided in macro and abstract ways. And today I have the pleasure of introducing our last, this is not our first event. We have had ones before last year particularly, and I will hand over to Dr. Huria Tafish, who's going to host the panel today. Thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to both the dispatches from the field and to the discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamam. Thank you very much. Okay. Good morning in New York, and hello for everyone joining us online from around the world. I am Huria Tafish, and I serve as the Director for Refugee Leadership and Partnership at Refugees International. And I'm really honored to be here today to moderate this conversation that is co-hosted by the Humanitarian and Refugees International to discuss what a future or what the humanitarian action would look like if we are reimagining it. I mean, we are living now or witnessing a reckoning time. The humanitarian system, as we know it, is being challenged. We are hearing about the international organization and INGOs. They had to downsize. They're saying they're forced to downsize their operations. And some international staff, they are also forced to leave their country of operations. But while all of that is happening, the local responders, the local actors on the ground are still there. They are there where they are always they are always will be, actually leading efforts on the ground that is saving lives. However, we might not have heard about these efforts much as Tamam mentioned, in the big halls of power, or we have not even heard about this effort as part of the humanitarian system. And that's why we're here today. Because the local cannot wait for the humanitarian system or for the system to catch up. And we have to act now because we need some sort of transformation. So for the past couple of months, the Humanitarian and Refugees International have been having conversation with local actors, with local responders who are leading efforts on the ground that is driven by the community. Together, we managed to capture some vision of what crisis response might look like if it is actually built from the ground up. And through these patches that you will see today, we're trying to show what a future of a humanitarian system would look like if actually those at the forefront of the communities are the one in the leading seats. So today, we will explore how to make sure that the future humanitarian system strengthen the local community-led efforts rather than undermines it, and why it have not done yet, and what stands in the way of this shift. Through our dispatches that we will see today, we will share with you some of the local communities or local leaders who have been doing an amazing job on the ground, and with our brilliant panelists for today also to make sure or to help us make sense of the way moving forward. So I'm joined here today with our panelists, and I will start with Haneen. Haneen is an external relation officer with Sudan Emergency Response Rooms and a fellow with us at Refugees International. And we're joined by Lorraine de la Cruz, which is the Executive Director of Center of Disaster Preparedness in the Philippines and a member of the NEAR Leadership Council. And we have Lorraine de la Cruz, Elizabeth Campbell, who is the Executive Director of ODI Global Washington and a former Deputy Secretary of State of Bureau of Population, Refugee and Migration. And Marcia Wong recently served the Deputy Assistant Administrator for USAID, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, and currently lists her LinkedIn bio as Angry as Hell Humanitarian, which I think we have a lot of them in the room today. So first, I want to thank you all, our panelists, for joining us today, and thank everyone who is in the room. And with that, let's get started. The first dispatches that you're gonna watch or listen to take us into the rooms and camps, classrooms and camps, where parents and teachers are fighting to keep education alive. They are from different places. We're talking about Venezuela and Rohingya camps in Bangladesh. And both highlight the wider struggle for education during protracted crisis or however in collapsing states or in a long-term displacement. So they invite us to reflect on how families and communities adapt and set up when formal systems actually fail to do so.
Cuando el docente no tiene para alimentar a sus hijos, cuando no tiene para costear un pasaje a un hijo que va a una universidad, cuando no tiene para comprarle uniformes escolares, o ropa, vestimenta, es bastante fuerte, y caemos en una decepción, una desesperación, todos los docentes. Y nos ha tocado hacer tortas, dulces, decoraciones, vender empanadas. Nos ha tocado reinventarnos. Hasta hemos aprendido a coser. El que no sabía coser,
lavar ropa ajena,
bisutería. Bueno, nos hace sentir mal, pues, porque nosotros estudiamos, lo que nos gusta es eso, la educación. Y entonces, o sea, nos hemos visto obligados a hacer otras cosas. Muchas veces no te envían al niño porque sencillamente no tienen en la casa qué darle. Y ellos dicen que en su casa, por ejemplo, por lo menos pueden hacerle una arepa con mantequilla y dársela, pero les da pena enviar eso para la escuela. Cuando hay comida en la institución, pocas veces funciona el sistema de alimentación en las instituciones. Bueno, cuando hay comida, la matrícula es impresionante, van todos los niños.
My name is Khan. I am a Rohingya refugee living in Cox's Bazar camp. I had to leave my home in Arakan, Myanmar, because of violence and persecution. Our life in the refugee camp is very difficult. Recently, we are hearing that the food ration will be reduced again at the end of this year. If that really happens, surviving in the camp will become very harder. People may even engage in bad activities just to survive. Already we don't have enough food and it is getting worse. And about the education, the situation is also very bad because of funding cuts. Many schools in the camp have already shut down. Most of the children cannot go to the school now. If this continues, what will be the future of our children? The next generation will grow up without education, without hope. For my own family, this meant real suffering. Many times we go to bed hungry. My children want to study, but they cannot. We have no chance to live a normal life, and I feel very hopeless. Still, people here try to support each other. If one family has nothing, others share. The youth try to keep learning themselves. Even when schools are closed, we continue to pray together for better days. My message to the world is to the outside of the world. I want to say, please don't forget us. We want to live with dignity, with food, education, and peace. And most of all, we want a safe and dignified return to our homeland in Myanmar. That is our biggest hope.
Great. So, Elizabeth, I would turn to you first. I mean, we often see in the humanitarian crisis whether education or protection or other essential services that meet essential needs get dropped out or constantly deprioritized or cut from the budget. What does that tell us about the political economy of aid? And what would need to shift the humanitarian system from being just reactive and saving lives in the moment to a system where it meets the broader needs and that prevent from people from being stuck in this cycle of marginalization?
Okay, thank you so much, and a huge thanks for inviting me to be part of this really impressive panel this morning. Look, I think probably we're moving into a moment where we're no longer talking about a single system that does or doesn't do. So that, yes. So we're at a moment where we're no longer talking about a single system that will do this or that. And it provides a huge opportunity for us to begin to actually meet the real needs of people, which I think, yes, everyone has to have their basic needs met. But fundamentally, what most people want is access to security, but also some level of stability related to what their economic future will be, what their educational future will be, and the ability to get that wherever it might be available, right? So sometimes if we look back at sort of, the early days of the system when it was originally formed, it was fundamentally about rights. It was about providing documentation and urging states to protect basic rights so that individuals who were impacted by conflict, displacement, and war could sort out their own solutions, find their way into labor markets, build new communities, start new businesses, and be protected from a rights-based perspective. I think that is definitely what we need to go back to. There's lots of different kinds of reasons. The United States was very central in this as to why it became a humanitarian assistance system. But that is, I was always fond of sort of saying that if you wanted to reform the UN, start with the US government, because you have to sort of follow the funding flows. And the US was such, as we all know, such a huge provider of assistance, and it was creating certain structural realities that made it very difficult to be more responsive to some of the local needs as were articulated today and as we all know well. I have always been a huge proponent of education in emergencies because that is the investment in the future. We all know that these emergencies do not resolve easily. They go on for decades and decades and decades. So plastic sheeting and food assistance will only take people so far We have to make these pivots. I think these pivots are going to be happening at regional levels, at national levels, at local levels. And remember that we have examples of institutions that have been built and have been highly effective at providing what is basically development assistance, education, and healthcare in conflict. And here I would actually point to UNRWA as such an interesting example of something that we should think about at this moment. That was a locally led solution to a highly complicated problem that continues to play out today, that achieved extraordinary development outcomes, absent a state and absent any resolution to the conflict. And those development outcomes are what allowed millions of Palestinians to find opportunities regionally and globally. So we do have these examples of things like this happening. That obviously is a global example of something that came together. But I have no doubt that pieces of that can be replicated in other contexts. And I think that if you bring a lens, not so much of assistance, but of rights and investment in development, knowing that we are not going to have an easy political resolution to a situation, you can still get excellent outcomes for people who are impacted by conflict and war.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And when it comes to UNRWA, I can say I can attest to that. I'm an UNRWA educated person who went to UNRWA school and had an UNRWA scholarship to go to university. So it really makes a difference when we're talking about long-term investment and how investing in education, it makes a big difference. Now, moving to you, Hanin. In Gaza, as in Sudan, we're seeing that communities provide mutual support as they exhaust the available solutions and the coping mechanisms. And not even basic needs are being met by the international humanitarian system. As we can see now in the UN food convoys have not been entered or delivered any food to Al-Fashar for the last year. We have seen reports about children are eating animal feed. But in your organization, the emergency response room colleagues are doing a heroic work. They're on the ground and trying to meet the needs of estimated 260,000 people who are trapped by the tightening siege. So from your perspective, what lessons from ERR work under these circumstances can be applied for future vision of humanitarian system? So what you're learning from the ground and how we can actually build a system that would be supporting to the work you're doing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hanin Ahmed. I am external officer and RI fellow, external officer for emergency response room, and RI fellow as well. I don't know how many of you knows about the emergency response room. For the sake of time, if many of you knows, so I will now introduce what we are doing. If not, so I'm going to explain it fastly. Would you please raise your hand? How many of you knows about that work we do? Oh, so thank you so much. So okay, for those who doesn't know what emergency response room do, emergency response room is a grassroots movement of more than 20,000 volunteers across 18 states, 118 localities across Sudan. We provide communal soup kitchen in the area that international and traditional system cannot access in South Kordofan, Kadugli, in everywhere across Sudan. Right now, we are writing a new humanitarian system, stories on the ground. So we are providing kind of services in a very innovative solution. We went to WFP and say, hey, your traditional way of providing food assistance will never chime in with the situation on the ground. So we have to turn the system to communal soup kitchen. And we went to UNICEF, like, hey, your system in education, it doesn't work right now on the ground. We should do alternative schools in the shelters. Alternative schools in the shelters and in other areas in different ways, and we succeed to get children back to school. And the lesson learned from this for the 2 years we are work on the ground, and we learned how to opening safe passages, do mass evacuations for civilians from Al-Fashir, from Durman, Khartoum, were sieged by RSF. And right now from South Kordofan, we are trying to opening safe passages to evacuate civilians. And we have, of course, as Horia said, 260,000 in Al-Fashir, and we have 190,000 in South Kordofan, in Kadugli, and Dalanj. The lesson is hyper-localization and decentralization of that resources. So we learned how to decentralize because we have different contexts. So Sudan is not the same. Even inside one state, the situation is not the same. So we are working it completely decentralized with a little centralized coordination to allow us to distribute the resources, autonomy, and light footprint and logistics. So we have, I have a small example on this. We have area called Mugjar in central Darfur, area affected by genocide, with only $5,000 completely localized fund from Avaz. We're able to run a school and build trust and peace within that community. Integrated services and community-led priorities. So we know how to work from the ground. We know what's the priority of the community. The international system doesn't know what the community needs right now, but we know because we are within the community. And for number 4, we are saving the dignity of the beneficiary. And we have a very famous case with the WFP. They ask us to share the beneficiary's name, and we denied to do that, and we stopped the project until they allow us to not to share any kind of names for the beneficiary, for the dignity of them, and even we don't share any kind of photos with them as well to save people dignity. But we have also a very accountable report called F system. So with that F system, we share every invoices and bank transfer to show that where money goes exactly, and numbers of the kitchen and numbers of the beneficiaries each day. And finally, the decision came from the lowest level. So we distribute the power, and right now we are doing kind of grassroots power, and we have that power across Sudan. So I think for the future, we have the ability to lead the country collectively and inclusively. And this is what we need in our third world countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Haneen. So see, you are tapping into different lessons that the current humanitarian system might have to shift, or parts of what we're doing in the humanitarian action have to shift in terms of listening to the people on the ground, meeting their needs, being flexible and adaptable, because sometimes we have a system that have been there or a procedure that have been for a long period of time, and it doesn't actually fit the current reality on the ground. And this is where you're going as ERR and providing examples of how it should be done and trying to make this system adapt to the local action. Thank you very much, Haneen. With that, I will move to our second block of dispatches. The next pair of dispatches take us to Cairo and Eastern DRC, where Sudanese refugees and Congolese hosts show solidarity, functions as a humanitarian system. This dispatches raises difficult questions about why international aid often overlooks neighborhoods, collectives, and families that carry the greatest pressures of displacement.
There are many problems for the Sudanese here, but the world does not know anything about them.
The war in Sudan made us flee our town and leave our houses to go to another city. We fled at the beginning, 1 month and 15 days after the war began. So the situation was a bit bad, but it was easier to escape because the number of people was small. So we were able to cross legally with our passports.
When we came, we found another war in Cairo. We came mainly seeking safety, seeking to live a decent life. But then you found another war. The war to get the right information. The war to find something to eat. The war to find a roof to live under.
A lot of Sudanese people don't have like water and also housing, and food. Some of them, they are living in street, and also because they lose their document like passport, they don't get the right because they don't have this document. So as we are Sudanese, we work as a team. We work like collective work. We work together. Here we have like more than 50 initiatives, educational programs, medical programs, and also like support programs.
I first started with a nursery and preschool, which evolved into a bigger centre. The initial idea was to offer nursery places to help mothers go to work. So during the year, children could stay at the nursery from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon for free.
She has a lot of programs provide for those refugees communities, especially for women and kids, in order to know how to do a lot of things with their hands.
It gives opportunities for women, allows them to develop their skills with the workshop she offers for very small fees. Working opportunities here in Egypt are limited. People can't work. So this offers them training so that they can work and bring bread to the table. It's a source of income for them.
This is some of our traditions there in Sudan. So when we came here, we work like as we are in Sudan.
They arrived at my house in their dozens, desperate and tired. They had escaped bullets and bombs and had left everything behind them: clothes, kitchen utensils, goats and sheep. They were worried that I wasn't going to be able to support them. Congolese like me open our doors when crisis hits because we have a culture of African solidarity and because we know that anything can happen in life. You may say to yourself that you can't help this or that person, but you may also find yourself in their position one day. Yet, what I and others are doing for displaced people is not easy. Even just from an economic point of view, imagine hosting more than 50 people. It is a heavy burden. We have had to start buying more water, more food, and more medicine. That takes its toll. Hosts like me have received zero support, though our neighbors do at least recognize the humanitarian work that we do. You have got a big responsibility, they often say. Not everyone can do that. Being a host has lots of challenges. When I receive my salary now, at the end of each month, I give part of it to my family members in the camps, and I also buy food for the people I host. Sometimes I end the month in debt because the cost is high, given what I earn. Still, I am doing this because I have a humanist heart and a sense of hospitality. I cannot accept that my family and other acquaintances might die of starvation when I have the money to buy flour that could have fed them for a week. I could not bear that. Moreover, I have seen this culture of welcoming displaced people into families throughout my life. I still hold out hope that one day there will be a new Congo, a new East, and a new city of Goma. Building it will require people of solidarity and action, just like the host families helping their compatriots through this painful war.
So we have listened to these two dispatches, and we have seen how solidarity is playing a role here on the ground within communities. And usually in some communities, the culture is not individualistic. It's about people, it's about others. And it's something that we sometimes struggle for that to make it part of the official system of how it works, or even to recognize this sort of collectiveness and solidarity on the ground. So you have worked for a long time at USAID, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, on advancing localization. Why has donor architecture been so hesitant until this moment to fund local groups directly? And what structural reforms could actually shift that?
I think I only have 10 minutes, but if you have 10 hours, let's just lock in the time. Thank you. Thank you first to all of you for joining in this conversation today, to the new Humanitarian, to Refugees International, to our hosts and to the panelists here. There's a little poignancy, I think, for all of us, and myself included. First of all, coming behind these powerful dispatches, I mean, those voices are humbling. I mean, I'm humbled by hearing the firsthand accounts of it. Because I am going to pull you back up into the bureaucracy, as numbing and lifeless it can feel right now. But there's poignancy in that a year ago, I was hosted by the new Humanitarian and Refugees International. And I remember sitting and basically bumping in my chair with excitement and optimism, because former USAID, BHA, had just released this locally led humanitarian assistance policy, and that there was real intent and investment and passion to making can I be profane? Well, to make the darn thing work, to just make it work. We owed everybody, these voices and everyone in the room and out there in the audience and beyond, we owed them that commitment. Okay, fast forward a year later, I'm still relentlessly optimistic, but it's a little bit more angry like hell. That's kind of where I am right now. Like, why has it been so resistant? I know all of you have been students or have been recipients of the biases that existed in the system. And we can go into long, treatises and dissertations about colonialism approach, the cultural biases that really worked against the local communities and people who were living the crisis. But they were being discussed in the capitals, in Geneva, in the New Yorks, and the Washington, D.C. So we recognize that. The question was how to move beyond that. And that's what we've all been working on for decades now. I am worried, and many of you may also be picking up a little bit on the vibe here. I mean, I see Jeremy and I see other here who are working the halls right now of the organizations. You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation about the reckoning. There's a lot of R words out there now: reform, reset, renewal, realignment. I am worried that what we don't hear is that self-preservation from some of these agencies and large organizations. And I am worried that I'm beginning to interpret that as the doors are going to close even more on the local participation and contribution. So elbows out, everybody, to make sure those doors stay open right now as there's panic in some of these organizations. And it will become very human behavior, but you can't let that happen. So that's there's my angry as hell moment. The one thing I would like to also just mention were barriers that civil society organizations, humanitarian development, local communities, that they identified for us when we were working on how to promote and advance locally led humanitarian action. So if I can refer to my notes to get it right, that they very bluntly told us that barriers like these complex application guidelines, why should we have to wade through 50, 60 pages for an answer that could be in a paragraph for you? Point taken. English language. Okay, there's another conversation out there on AI and how we can use it, but English language, everything being in English, for French speaking, Arabic speaking, Ukrainian speaking communities, that was already built in barriers for them. The pre-award requirements, audits, surveys, vetting. I need to touch on that one because that's a painful one. And then just recognizing, however we work with you and the communities, please bring with it that understanding that there's not a gold standard that was organically given birth from day one of a local organization. So bring with it the training and the technical assistance to help us grow with you in that. So that was taken to heart, and there was intent to invest and continue with that. If there's one point I'd like to just put my finger on heavily, every dollar is going to count, right? Every dollar, euro, pound, yen, it's going to count. It always did, but it's probably going to count even more. And that gets into the issue of risk management, risk sharing. And even though we all recognize that the local organizations and communities, first and foremost, are feeling the crisis and conflict, can first and foremost be the most able responder, but that doesn't mean they absorb all the risk by themselves. So we have to still maintain integrity in understanding how to share the risk, how to minimize it, because I am afraid every dollar that counts, there's going to be all sorts of new things attached to that. Accountability, fiduciary oversight. So please keep investing in it. I appreciate how our colleagues here from the Sudan Emergency Response Room manage that delicate space, still being accountable, but protective of their communities. So we still have to invest in that. And I have one solution I can offer up and see if we can advance that a little bit. You asked about some of the reform ideas that can be out there, and there are many, but if I can make one of special appeal. In BHA, I was also the climate lead. It seems so obvious when we're talking about preparedness, disaster risk reduction, and Lorene, I know you can talk to that well, like that we wouldn't be just factoring those who are going to be the first ones there as the waters come in, the storms are hitting the shores. We need to make sure that's a default setting for all of us now, that when we are talking preparedness, these big climate action plans, adaptation, that the local organizations are with us at the very start before we put pen on paper. The AI tool world. I'm on the board of a network that's looking at safe AI, the CDAC network, and I think as part of a structural reform, we need to be much more cognizant, aware, and really invest in learning about the AI impacts on us. It can be an incredible accelerant. I just mentioned English language. Why should I have to do a 50-page English language thing? Okay, I'll put it through ChatGPT. You'll get my English language proposal. But we also know there's safety and implications to that. I do believe there's a positive accelerating factor to adaptation of AI and technology, but how we do it's going to be really, really careful and minded. The other one, just simple mechanics and how to get more funding too. When we do awards, again, if we're putting every local organization to some impossible 5-star, A-class, gold standard, then we're not investing at all, and we're being hypocrites about it. So if we, whoever, donors in the future, philanthropies, others, if we are putting awards, then staple to it a couple 100,000 of technical assistance. Provide advisors with the teams to build the human capacity, the systems there that you can then walk away knowing that they can keep on functioning. The word vetted is really powerful right now. As we were watching, regrettably, the destruction of BHA and the impacts that it was felt through the systems, but certainly on the ground, I was working with a group of USAID experts to create a website called Pro Impact. Pro Resource Optimization is the long title of it. We pulled forward a number of projects for global health and HA to put on the website, and then drove it towards philanthropists, family-owned foundations, to say, look, these are in train. It's $1, $2, $3 million. It's digestible. It's targeted. You can quantify it. But the word vetted, when they saw the word vetted by USAID, that was powerful to all of them because it meant, okay, these are trusted. When you look at that list later, count how many of them are local organizations. They are the minority. And that shows a weakness on our work, that we did not have more vetted organizations in that. So I will wrap there. But I think ultimately we do need to have that attitude and action shift within the UN systems, within our donors. I think we all get it. Elbows out, people. Be angry as hell right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marsha. You have touched upon really very important points, but I feel like we are stuck in this cycle where the international community say, but they are not ready to handle or to do so, or to handle the funding, or to manage the processes on the ground. And if they are not ready, this is because the system have been always externalized their work and they have not been part of the system. So we cannot imagine all of a sudden overnight that now all the local organizations are ready and they can handle what the international community think. There should be that transitional period, right? There should be that period where they are really supported, the transitional period where we're making them part of the system, and we have to be patient with that period because the system have been there for long and the destruction have been built over decades. So I'm not sure how could we as international community come in and expect things to be cleared out overnight. So getting there, it needs some change and power. I mean, power shifting also idea is very, is it power shifting or power? Who are we to shift actually the power? So all this kind of conversation when it get to this topic, when we're moving or we're sharing power with local actors, I feel they actually have the power for a change, not us, and it's the opposite. And now we gonna listen to our last dispatches. And on this final set of dispatches, it highlights how communities are not just experiencing consequences of crisis, but also leading responses to them. However, they are by organizing against gender-based violence or demanding a role in climate solutions. So the challenge is whether the humanitarian system will take this form of leadership and this effort seriously as part of the official work.
Hi, my name is Ayo Irene Helen. I'm a South Sudanese refugee. I come from a refugee camp where we don't read climate reports, we live them. Our shelters are washed away by the rain. Our crops die from droughts. We walk further every day for water and firewood. And yet when climate solutions are designed, our stories are left out. Why? Because we are seen as people with needs, not people with ideas. Let's prioritize meaningful refugee participation. Let's change the system. Let's bring climate finance and solution into refugee camps. Not just handouts, but partnerships. Solidarity means we fight this crisis together. Let refugees lead at the last mile. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Tumusi Fura from Terikaka Brooks Argentine. I was trained as a midwife at a local level. We have been working very well before this issue of reduced fund came in. But now have faced many challenges whereby you find that the expectant mother has approached you when time has gone, maybe during the night. You find you have no airtime, you have no anything you can use. You find that you have a challenge now how in terms of transport. But what we do, because of many challenges we have been facing because of this reduced fund, we have managed to borrow knowledge and have to unite with these youth, like border cyclists, to be assisting us. We have like 2 border cyclists who do assist us in case of such a cases, so that we can transport these expectant mothers to the hospital. We have been also trying to make sure we train other mothers to have such a knowledge of how they can help themselves before approaching us.
My name is David Mugisa. I've been working as a community-based volunteer in Changwadi Refugee Settlement. Currently, I'm at home following the work stop order or the reduced funding that affected most of the organizations, and especially the one where I've been working, and working closely with communities and especially the people that are already living in the community, and those are the refugees, asylum seekers, plus different categories of the forcibly displaced and stateless persons. Because of the rapport we had built with most of these people, we can't sit down and watch when these people continue to face the different challenges. We've continued willingly to help and guide these people where there's need. For example, in the survival skills, different activities that they can do to survive amid the meager resources that are available. Lots of things that have happened have affected them directly, not only me as an individual, but also as the refugees in the community. But it is our role as community-based people or volunteers to keep working with these people to see how best we can make a difference in their lives as we maneuver through these challenges, and with hope that maybe in future things will get better and we can get back to employment and continue serving and delivering different services. Thank you.
Great. That takes us to you, Lauren. The NEAR network have been pushing for localization for decades. Like we have listened in the dispatches where these local communities, they're already doing the work. So what progress you have seen so far for your localization advocacy, and how do you imagine a humanitarian system that would look likely? This isn't, if we're imagining a system that communities lead the design, what does it look like?
So NIR will be celebrating its decade-long existence, 10 years, come next year. So that's quite a long year already of working with communities, partner organizations in different regions of the world and in different countries. And I think across the world, communities on the front lines of displacement, conflict, and inequality, they are already remaking humanitarianism in actual practice. They are building responses on the basis of how they understand context, the needs of the people on the ground, and it's rooted in solidarity, uh, understanding the well-being of people, and of course, with care. While we're looking at the international system, it mainly focuses on debates on right now resets. Reset is the agenda, and of course, the question of reforms. But I really think the major question is the need to really shift power. We've surfaced this also with my fellow panelists. But with your question, how can we really shift power? I think let's imagine it at least in three areas, like on the question of finance. It really needs to be direct, flexible, multi-year funding with overheads, because overheads never have been experienced by local and national actors, and reserves. International non-government organization, they have that. That should be the rule that should govern locally led organizations in terms of in relation to the pooled funds. And if we're going to look at CBPFs, the community-based pooled funds, that has to be reorganized in order to include local and national non-government organizations in the governance setup or structure, and has allocation in leadership. On the question of risk, why we need to shift power in risk. We need to replace the blanket exclusions in line with risk sharing agreements, like on the question of joint fiduciary controls, proportional due diligence, and of course, community accountability. And last, the real question on coordination, which is the reality of the humanitarian system. There needs to resource national and regional platforms that convene authorities, civic actors, and responders. We need to measure coordination by decision-making shared, not in so many meetings held. Why this matters now? With budgets tightening, we all know this. Legitimacy and effectiveness depend on efficiency and who decides now. So I think it's our appeal as a network globally. Let's contribute to really shifting power. Let's shift the power to local and national organizations, truly working on the ground with partner communities and the affected.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lauren. And that also takes us to a point where we feel that locally led work, a local organization, have always to face what we call you said it, vetting and the due diligence, and they have always been questioned on another level. For example, they would be questioned, why you? Whom do you represent? Why we have to give your organization? But at the same time, the same international actors who are questioning the local actors, maybe they have to reflect that same critical lens to themselves. Why are you? Why you like? So whatever that person on the ground, for sure, they know more and they know better. And if they have the right expertise, they would be able to respond to the crisis. And those in the international community coming, I don't know, from Geneva or New York or whatever, they don't have the right to question the local actors, who are you and why you. It have to be the opposite, actually. But the system have been going for so long in the opposite direction. So we start, even when we're thinking about the local actors taking the lead, as if it is like the non-ordinary, or there is something not right there. And this is where I think the mentality of the people who are working on the humanitarian system have to shift in order to shift power. Because when we're talking about shifting power, it's about shift in individual mentality. It's a start from there, and shift in the processes, and it shifts in funding. So we have to work on different levels, and individuals who are involved in this, they play a very big role. And we know that the humanitarian industry is pretty big, right? And it's an industry at the end of the day. So finally, thank you, everyone. But before we close here, I want you to give me, in one sentence, and starting with you, Elizabeth.
My sentence has a semicolon. It's actually very long, but it's
okay, it's fine.
It's a semicolon.
Okay, no problem.
Well done.
We're good. If communities have been the first and the last responders, what is the role of the humanitarian system in the future, and what must it give up?
So I wanted to focus my response. I wanted to focus my response on, not on these complex situations like that we face today in Gaza and Sudan, but on these protracted situations that have been languishing for decades and decades that everyone knows about. My one sentence with the semicolon. Humanitarian actors and foreign aid cannot drive market-based solutions. To shift from aid to private sector-led solutions, which implies, by the way, local private sector, there needs to be a change in leadership and the design of a new structure of actors from the global to local level with diverse skills, expertise, and problem-solving capabilities to more effectively advance market-based solutions for refugees and the communities in which they reside.
Thank you. That was a good sentence. Thank you very much. But it taps on what we're talking about. Like, it have to start with the leadership. And this is another conversation too on how to ensure that the leadership or the locally led leadership makes its way to the whole of power. So we're not just talking about local leaders on the ground, but we're talking about local leaders on this side of the world. And I will go now for you, Haneen.
Okay, I have a comment before I go to my last sentence. Actually, for the Sudanese refugee right now in Cairo and in Chad, there is no presence for the UNHCR to provide any kind of protection, any kind of accessibility for work. That's why our people are suffering in Cairo right now, and this is insane. As I have seen Sudanese women, they are being exploited and facing unspeakable violence to find some kind of food in Cairo. They are really fleeing from war to a bigger war. So this is very insane. And I would encourage all of you that you are sitting here to advocate for this issue. And we want to see a real action from the UN system, from the Security Council towards not only Sudanese refugee, but every refugee around the world who can find their rights right now. And my final word, keep your eyes in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you, Haneen. Marisha, your turn. If you have to tell us what is the role of a future humanitarian system and what must it give up?
I have a lot of semicolons in my sentence.
You only have one.
I only have one semicolon and a lot of dots. Okay, 3 o'clock in the morning. Seriously, when I thought about this, I had the vision of when I'm driving across America, I have a driver's license from Maryland, but it's accepted in Virginia, in Kentucky, all across the United States. What would I call that? And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I came up with, and it's probably not very good English, compliance mutuality. Does that work? Semicolon. Because as we talk about shifting power, that means resources, that means policy, processes, voice, we recognize that the shift of power is accompanied or is triggered by increased confidence. I know this can be a tricky word, increased trust. So why don't we trust each other a little bit more in this system? And if everybody here on this panel had vetted by X organization, X donor, why isn't that good enough for me? And so I'm looking at how we can keep propelling some sort of compliance mutuality, streamline, quicken, and accelerate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's such an important topic to talk about when we talk about trust, because it's rarely to find a trust-based philanthropy or even funding in the current context. To you, Lorraine. Same thing. If you would like the international system to move forward, what should it give up in the future?
I think my message would be for the UN and each and every actors here in the humanitarian system. My appeal and call is, let's support, let us not sideline what communities are already building. Humanitarianism has a future if only we align financing and governance with this reality. If we don't, it's the system that may not survive.
Exactly. Thank you very much for our panelists. And for now, I will open the floor to our audience, and we will take our first question.
Okay. They were ready. Okay, here and then there. Thank you so much for this excellent panel. I'm really excited to hear. I'm Holly Radice, and I'm with the CAP Network. One thing that you all talked about, you talked about efficiency, you talked about communities, you talked about agency, and cash and voucher assistance contributes to that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how experiences you have or how you see cash can contribute towards locally led responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we take the second one and then we go for the answers? Yes, please. Yes, you.
I also have one from our online audience that I want to read for you here, and then we'll take yours as well. So how can students, researchers, and early career professionals contribute to reshaping humanitarianism so that it isn't just a conversation among established actors? That's from our online audience.
Great. So,
thank you very much. I'm Alexandre with Geneva Call based in Geneva. I just wanted to ask one question. I think you all underlined the importance of local leadership and the resilience that we found. But one thing that we see from the international humanitarian system is that there's a lot of challenges for us to leave a context. The exit strategies is such an issue, right? And we know, and Tamam underlined it today, it's not the right moment, it's too violent, the way this system is now being shaken. But are we not facing a moment where we should ask ourselves the right questions? And as you rightly said, Marcia, it was fascinating. Maybe some of you were in an event that DevEx organized where there's different philanthropists who are trying to, catch up and trying to say, okay, we can contribute, but not with 200 million, but with 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. But they asked the right question. They were on the stage and they said, okay, before I contribute, let me know how you make sure that if we give you 1 million, then you can sustain. You will not be needing another million for the next 15 years. So my question to you is like, are we not also missing the importance of helping these organizations to live properly? And I know an organization as respectable as MSF, for example, would say many of our hospitals, if we leave, they collapse because we haven't really thought about that. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. So we have the first question regarding the cash assistant, and how do you think the cash assistant is helpful in this case? Anyone? Yes, please go ahead.
I can take this question. We have a great experience with NRC, with group cash assistance. So they start give each bedroom approximate to 5,000 per time per F1 per request actually. Yeah. So it was so useful and it was unrestricted funds. So we find it really good, but we need more than 5,000 due to the inflation from the ground. And we have the cash consortium from different organizations right now working with us through the LCC. So yeah, it's a very effective and efficient way.
I think also a lot of organizations are scared when we talk about cash assistant, and they end up giving some items that people go to sell to get the cash. So it's sometimes you better listen to what really people need on the ground before going that route.
I think the way because people think it's like a cash, but it's coming through the in Sudan. We with a electronic application called Banka, so it's completely safe to send it to or transfer it to volunteers.
Thank you. And we have the second question from the online was about what students and academic could actually play a role here and not just rely on the existing structure.
I mean, my immediate response to that question is just act. Don't ask for permission. You are a student at a university. You have a huge amount of privilege, and that just bring your voice out. We need more, not less in this moment.
Thank you. And we have our third question, and I just want to reset to you to make sure that we get it right. So you're talking about how to ensure the local organization could actually sustain themselves if the international leaves. Exactly. So if the international organization leave, how could the local organization sustain themselves? Is it possible?
Give it a shot. Thank you. That's one I think poses, the biggest dilemma for all of us, but it's also the opportunity of bringing these different systems together. And we are talking, as Elizabeth said, local, international, private sector. Can I say the word nexus? But there you go. It's the nexus also, because we have got to break the cycle of need humanitarian response. And yeah, if we're trying to bring in all these other actors to be responsible and principled and helping support communities, they want to know those investments will be lasting. Why would you, put money down if you're coming for different objectives? I think partly it's going in at the very beginning. And again, it's working with the local communities to say, how do we break that cycle? Is it education, job creation, workforce development? How do we let them continue to be the champions of that work throughout the beginning, all along the way? When I hear our international NGO colleagues and experts say, my God, 20 years in Haiti. I'm like, why are we 20 years in Haiti? Because there are governance issues. There's diplomacy failures. There's private sector market stimulation that didn't take place because we weren't moving cash around enough. So I think if we go in, we're doing a response and start, and then what's the exit? What are all the steps and tools and capacities that have to be built? Put that in the design at the beginning, because it's too late, you're 9 and 10 to be thinking that.
If I can also share, I think we need to break this kind of thinking or mindset that if and when INGOs or donors really lead the programs, projects in the communities, that their lives would stop, or their what they've been venturing on would. This should be what do you call that? We cannot let's erase that from our system. It's really like I'm looking at the parallelism or similarities that, like, INGOs would always say that local and national actors and organizations need capacity building. It has been how many decades? My dears, we've been capacitated and we're very much capacitated all this year. So let's not always put in projects, in programs, capacity building for local and national actors. For all we know, communities, organizations in the communities really know better than us. And so, with or without funding, with or without these organizations, the communities will survive. It's their context, they're there all throughout their lives. So let's, shift our mindset and the kind of thinking that we have. It's like that we are, like that being messianic, that we are saviors in the world.
Great, thank you very much. That's great. And to touch upon that, I was also in a conversation with someone from a refugee camp in Kenya, and we were talking about the funding cuts. And he was like, "What funding cuts? We always have no funding, and we have always been there, and we have been always doing the work." So it was like, and when it comes to like, if they leave, the structure will collapse. That doesn't tell you that the structure was wrong, not the community is wrong. So there's something in the structure that we have to work on to make sure that if you leave, it actually things continue growing. So maybe there's nothing wrong with the locals, it's in the structure that is already there to lead the locals. And for now, I would thank everyone for their time and the questions and the reflections. And now we have to draw this conversation to a close. We want to bring these reflections into the wider UNGA debates folding this week. Now we have to remember we're back in New York. We're talking about UNGA to offer some closing thoughts, and we are delighted to welcome Alice Armani Sikui, Director of OCHA Humanitarian Pool Funds. Please go ahead, Alice. Alice.
Thank you so much, and good to see so many of you here. And a big thanks to the new Humanitarian and to Refugees International for convening this important event and helping us continue to flip the script, spotlighting experiences from the ground, not our initiatives to design everything from top down. I'm here on behalf of Tom Fletcher, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, who sends his regards and unfortunately could not be present, but you know very well that this topic is deeply important to him and a centerpiece of what he's been advocating as a shift in the humanitarian system. I want to also congratulate the panelists for such compelling remarks, which I personally stand behind, and for reminding us what is possible when we put communities first. And the dispatches from the field and from the front lines are vivid snapshots of what humanitarian action can do when we look and what it can look like when we get it right. I think it all paints the same pictures, right? When communities are at the heart of our action, incredible things happen. And each of the voices carries the same message that most of the most effective solutions arise when crisis-affected communities are in the driver's seat. We have heard in such a compelling way that community-led approaches are not just preferable, they are essential. And our task now, as has also been said, is that the international humanitarian system shift into this reality to support, better scale, and better lean on these initiatives and not overwhelm them. I think the good news, and if I may, I am an optimist, so I'll just put it out there, is that I do think this shift is underway. I take the points on the resistance out there. Let's not deny it, but I do think a shift is underway. If I use my own area of work on the OCHA managed pool funds, we have over the last few years been on a journey to look at how we can do better by supporting local and national partners. And it's been a great conversation. We're very appreciative of colleagues such as from NEAR for helping us, for giving us the hard truths, for telling us this is what we want to see you do differently. And I think it's recognized we have listened, we're working on some of it, but our heart is in the right place and we're moving it forward as quickly as we can. But, we're pleased in Sudan to have been a supporter of the mutual aid groups, and congratulations for that amazing work. In Ethiopia, we've been shifting our prioritization to the field level. In Niger, we brought affected communities in vetting our projects and selecting them. So not only did they decide where we should put the money, they actually gave feedback on all the projects and sent certain organizations back to the drawing board if they weren't satisfied with the contents. In Ukraine, we're looking at how to make our funding more accessible, working with community-based organizations. Globally, 55% of around 1 billion plus resources, 55% go to local national partners, and we're targeting to get that to 70% as soon as possible. And we continue to innovate in dialogue with local national partners, working with refugee-led, women-led, youth-led organizations. Again, there is so much knowledge and skill out there, and it's about empowering it to be all that it can be. The reset is very much, the humanitarian reset, as has been said, is very much at the center of this. It's about regrouping and reforming to make sure that our system is faster, smarter, and leaner. That means moving our programmatic decisions to the deep field with local communities and partners in the decision and in the discussion process. It's not about inviting them to our coordination discussions, but actually shaping our coordination around what exists at the local level. It's about more quality funding, it's been said, more risk sharing. I'm really glad to see there is progress on this, more equitable partnerships, participation in governance and decision making. It's getting more direct assistance, more cash, as was said, in people's hands, despite some of the skepticism and concerns that might exist. More leadership, particularly of women and girls at the center, simpler ways of working, more local and national partner leadership. There's so much that I have seen and I see is at the heart of our agenda to evolve. Now, obviously, this is a culture shift. It's been said. It's a mindset shift. Radical reform, as Tom has said, requires those with power to give it away. It's going to be a tussle for a little while. But I want to believe, and I do believe, that while we're at a crossroads, there's really one option if we are going to save the system. And I think that's been said. We don't actually have a choice. Clinging to business as usual is no longer going to cut it, is not an option. And so while there is reason for anger, there's also, as you said, reason for optimism. There's resistance, but there is no choice but to move forward on shifting this power, shifting processes, shifting funding, shifting the center of gravity to those who are truly on the front lines and who wake up the next day after an emergency and start responding, not waiting for the international system to mobilize in their support. So I will end there, but just to say that there is push, there is progress, there's still a lot of work to do, but I do hope that when we come back together, perhaps next year, and look at the same topic, we will have seen that our system has evolved to be more locally led and more globally supported. This is really the only way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alice. We're really hoping, so hopefully next year at this room, we'll come back. Thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you for being in the room, and for those also who joined us online. Please go ahead if you want to say a few words.
Just thank you, everybody. I'm not supposed to come here, but I'm slightly freaked out because I got a flashback of 10 years ago when we've talked about the grand bargain. And if we hear now, everything that was said here is right and logical and overdue and has been said exactly the same way 10 years ago. And it is important for us to not fall into the same trap of saying the right things just to be able to ignore them later. And I say that not out of benevolence. I'm afraid that someone in 10 years will say, the new humanitarian did that 10 years ago and didn't stand behind it. So I'm being protective of us here. I incredibly am indebted to the panelists who talked about it, and to my colleagues and to the people who spoke from the ground. I am not as much of an optimist. I fear that the incredible and amazing work that is done by you in emergency response rooms in Sudan will be, the attention will bring scrutiny that international organizations don't have. You will be scrutinized, and be careful about that. Because now, for some reason, no international organization fails and carries the burden of the failure of the system. But if you are illustrated to have failed at anything, you will be carried as an example of how localization doesn't work. And we talk about shifting power, yet we want those who have power benefit from it and use it relentlessly to give it away voluntarily for no reward. And I mean, I struggle to find a historical example for where that has happened. And the reliance on the benevolence of those with power exclusively is a scary prospect. And that we need to think about, because we have asked for power to be shifted, and it was promised, and it hasn't happened. And we're living between a genocide, 10 million people displaced in Sudan, and crises that hardly register on the news anymore. We cannot afford to sit for another 10 years to see how this experiment worked or didn't work. So with all hope that I can muster, and with nervousness and fear as well, because we've talked today as if politics don't exist, as if Western liberal states are not descending into fascism, as if friends and colleagues who are on a flotilla might not be sunk by drones, as if dozens of Palestinians haven't been killed today, as if Sudanese aren't still displaced, as if Somalians are still neglected. There is a political context around that needs to be considered and factored in and spoken about. I apologize for jumping with that. I just don't think we have the right to get out of a discussion this serious with, unbridled smiles and hope, as if everything is going to work just because we've talked for an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you again for everybody who has participated. Thanks.